everyone, and welcome to my studio. I'm excited to share this demonstration with you today. It's called Toward the Falls. I created this piece based on a reference photo that I took while I was hiking recently at this beautiful waterfall near my home. There's a lot of content that will be covered in this demonstration, so I have broken it into 3 videos, and I'll be posting them all within the month. So I hope you're as excited as I am to get started with this. Let's go. Okay, today I thought we would paint this gorgeous scene. I took this photo recently at this beautiful state park that's near my home. I live in a gorgeous rural area and always love getting out and getting these photos. So I've decided to work on Sennelier La Carte paper today. I've really been enjoying this paper lately. It only accepts dry media, so no wet underpainting. I do enjoy doing wet underpaintings, but on this paper you can't do that. And part of the reason that I chose this paper is because I love this mid-toned, warm color. And it will work really well with this piece. If you look, you can see that in the path there's a lot of warms. Underneath this cool gravel, there's this dirt color that's very similar to the color of this paper. And I can also see that there's a lot of yellows and there's some red in this tree here. Some of my really highlighted areas are quite warm. So I'm going to have the temperature of this painting be dominantly warm. So that's the reason that I've chose this paper. To sketch in my drawing, what I almost always do, especially with a landscape, is I like to cut my surface, my substrate, into quarters. That way, so I've already done that on my reference photo. If you look, you can see that I've cut it into quarters on each side, and then I'll come over and do that on my surface as well. So that's how I can basically transfer. It's kind of like a grid. It's just not going through the entire surface. So I can use these as a map to map in my drawing. So let's get started on that. I can see that my horizon line is approximately halfway between this lower mid quadrant. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in. And you know, I don't really worry too much about being super accurate at this point. I mean, I want to establish where everything is, but I'm using vine charcoal, and that makes it pretty easy to go back and adjust things later if I need to. So this is actually the foreground area. I want to, so right underneath this tree is kind of what I've been looking at. There's another farther, which is, now that I'm looking at it, really more of the horizon line right above it. I can always put that in later. I'm not going to worry about that. It's a detail I don't really need to worry about right now. The next thing I'm going to do is get this path in. So if I look, it is about 3/4 of the way over in between this quadrant here. So I can come down. I know it's going to be right about here. And it's going to end right above this line. And it's going to end down below, approximately halfway between these lines. So that gives me a pretty good starting point for that. Let's just get this guy in, and it's going to be right about here, and it's going to come slightly. I'm going to look at this angle. It's going to come down to about here. It's a pretty small space back there, and then this angle I can see that it's going to be like this. So I'll actually take my charcoal and use it on its side to get that angle. And look at this one again. It's kind of like that. So there's part of the path already. This, I can see, kind of comes back. This will all be possibly adjusted later. Use that angle, bring it over. And I need to look at where this ends. It's about a third of the way over here. So I'm going to put it right about there, and comes down slightly, then over, and look at this angle. I want to look at this midpoint right here. So it comes a little bit, about almost halfway down from this lower quadrant and halfway between this one. So a third over and right in the middle, so right to there. So now I can look at that angle and just get it in. There's my bush. I'm kind of actually negative painting this bush right now. And I've already got this point in where I see that the path ends, so I can kind of just lightly sketch that in. So there's my path. Okay. Let's get this tree trunk. Let's get this trunk in. It's a very prominent part of this landscape. And actually, what I'm hoping, what my plan is that this will be my focal area. So that's going to be the star of the show up there. And this path will kind of bring us up. These lights will bring us up to the focal area. And then these lights will bring us back down and around. That's the goal. So let's see here. So this guy, this tree trunk, is going to be about halfway in between this quadrant. So I'm going to put it right and halfway between the vertical quadrant. So we're going to bring it over a little bit. It's going to be right about here. And it comes up to about halfway where this trunk diverges. So let's get that in. Let's get that point in. It's going to be about halfway. So, you know, for me, this is not the most fun part of painting, but it's necessary. I want my viewer to obviously see what this is. I'm not a realistic painter. To me, it's not about getting every, you know, branch and every leaf in exactly as I see it in this photo. I'm going to be making a much more impressionistic painting, but I do want the composition to be accurate. I took this photo with the intent of, you know, getting it as close to the composition as I could at the time that I knew that I would want to paint. So, you know, I want to keep that composition as accurate as I can. So this, you know, this part just takes a little bit of time, and instead of rushing through it, I try to just enjoy this process, because rushing through this part is essentially going to affect the painting later. You know, we'll get to the fun part. And if you don't want to watch this, then skip on through and you can watch the, you know, the fun part of getting all the beautiful color in. So, okay, I'm going to basically just kind of sketch this in, and I can see that it's coming at a bit of an angle, so I'm just going to bring it up like that. And if it's not perfect now, like I said, that's okay. I can see that this branch comes over to about here. So, and actually, yep, halfway up, I'm going to go ahead and just bring that over and bring it over again. This does not, again, have to be perfect. We're going to be doing some work on these branches later. So there's that one. And let's see, there's the main trunk, comes just about in the middle. So it's going to be right about here. And I'm going to go ahead, it actually branches off into two areas up there. So let's bring that up like this. And it branches off here, which is right above. I'm going to bring it up right above, or I'm sorry, right below this landmark. So I'll bring that up. And again, I'm not too worried about, you know, getting it just right. Like obviously this is, I've got the drawing, this is larger up here, but I can adjust all that when we go in with the dry pigment. So let's get this last one in. And it's actually gonna stay pretty close to this one. It diverges just a little bit. Right here, it kind of comes over. A lot of branches are going to be covering this area, so I'm not super concerned about this top area. I just want to get that idea of what's going on. Okay, and just kind of go like that. So there's that tree. Let's get our dark masses in. So what I like to do is I can see, especially if I squint my eyes, which is a really good way to look at your darks and your lights, your values in your painting. So I can see if I squint my eyes that there's really this big mass right here. I'm not going to worry about these little details. I'll put them in later. This is one big mass right here. So I want to get that in. So it basically starts right about here and it comes down. I'm going to bring it down to about halfway. So slightly over and halfway down. So I'm just going to lightly sketch that in. Kind of comes over at an angle like that. And there's a tree I can see back here that's going to become a separate entity, a separate tree, but for now, we're just massing it in. So it actually, I can see that it slightly comes over the path as far as overlapping right up in here. So I'll bring that down and then it comes over to, like I said, right about a quarter of the way, like that. And we'll just put this trunk in and that's pretty accurate. It's gonna be right about there. Okay, so there's one of our first big dark masses. If I squint again, I can see that these trees in front of it, let's move this. These trees in front are lighter in certain areas. I want to get that in as well. So I'm gonna come over here, start to block in this area. Okay, I'm still getting in this dark tree, by the way. I'm still working on that just a little bit. So it kind of comes down, up over into here. And there's actually this, if I squint, I can see that there's almost like this V. And it's going to come down like this. So what I'm doing is, you could look at it two ways. I'm kind of negative painting around this light area, or negative drawing, I should say. And then it comes down like this. Okay, so one thing I like to do so I don't get confused is I will lightly, with my vine charcoal, get my dark in. It'll just help me remember what I'm doing and remember where that is. I'm also going to do that with my tree trunk. I'm using a pretty light touch. I don't want to fill up the tooth of the paper, but the vine charcoal is, if you use it lightly, it definitely won't do that if you're careful and you don't really push hard. So let's see here. Let's get in, there is also this dark area here if I squint. So I can see that. I want to put that in. So I am going to start right about here. To me, this is all it's getting into this mid-tone right here, and I'm not going to worry about that. If I really squint, this is where the dark starts. So right about here, come over and down. I can see that it's about halfway right there. And it comes over and down to right about little over halfway here, and a little bit below this. quadrant. So there it is. And it actually comes right down to the horizon line. This is actually a bush over here, just like that. And then we can, this is actually a little bit below the horizon line, so I'm going to, it's a shadowed area. I'm going to go like that and darken that up. And put in, let's see here. Here's my lighter area. Okay guys, I zoomed in a little bit because I think that you'll be able to see it better. So thank you for being patient with me. This is only the second video I've done. I know I have a lot to learn with the actual videotaping of these pieces. So bear with me. Hopefully the content will keep you here and interested. So, okay, I am okay with where my real darks are. The next thing I want to do is what we were working on was getting some of these mid-tones going up in this area. So let's continue with that. So I'm going to come back in with this same mid-toned green, and I'm really just, I'm looking at the shapes, I'm looking at where do I see the midtones, and I'm not going to be too careful. I'm going to cover up some things. I'm going to cover up, you know, even some of these trunks that I put in the background. What I'm really looking at are the shapes. I know that I'm going to be carving the sky into these areas, and you know, I'll be carving over. I'll be carving over some of these, the foliage, and doing that layering is part of, at least for me, the process of what makes it look natural and beautiful. I also like some of the paper color to shine through. I mean, that's, you know, if it doesn't at the end and it ends up all just being, you know, the dry pigment, that's okay. But part of the beauty of having a toned paper is having a little bit of it peeking through to create this unified look to your piece, which I find very beautiful. Excuse me. Okay, so I'm going to, one thing that I'm noticing that I want to start getting in is down in here, there's a little bit of a warmer bush or something back here that I want to get in. So I'm going to find a color. I'm actually going to start with a fairly, I have a pretty wide variety of neutral greens. You'll probably have noticed by now. You know, I love the Terry Ludwig green selection, but there's also, you know, a lot of Unison has some gorgeous greens. Blue Earth has beautiful greens. Girault has beautiful greens. You know, there's a lot. I mean, I have other pastels besides those as well. Work with what you have. It's more important to look at the temperature and the value. So I can say this is a dark, warm color. So, you know, this is a warm, dark color. So that's what I'm putting in. I see it up in here as well. There's going to be a lot of warmer, kind of russet colored tones that will go on top of this. But right now, I'm just building up the bones of the piece. So I also see in this main little bush, it gets pretty warm. In fact, soon I might add that branch in. I'm not sure yet. I do see that there's quite a bit of dark. I really want to establish my horizon line back here. So I'm going to do that real quick. And in fact, let me find the right color. I'm going to come in with pretty dark pastel back here. So, you know, I want to look carefully at what's going on back here because you know, if I just had one line for the horizon, it's going to be a little boring. It's not going to create the depth that I'm hoping to achieve. So I can actually see that, you know, here's where a curve in the bend is, and then it goes farther back. And I want to create that in my painting. So, you know, I can always adjust later, but I'm actually going to bring this up a bit and say, you know, put a line in there and know that that's where it's farther back in the distance. And, you know, back here, I've started to lose my path, but that's okay. I can draw it back in. And in fact, I'm going to do that while I'm thinking about it, so I can see that that's where you know, part of that far back, you can look and see that there's something in the distance back there, and that's part of the horizon line. And then there's a pretty dark, here's my bush that's always adjusting, you know, it's, this is not a static thing. It's going to change as we go, and that's just part of the process. I mean, that's, like I said, I think of it as problem solving. I don't necessarily look at painting as relaxing. There's times it's quite joyous and I love it, but there's other times that it's you know, it's work. And it's all about problem solving and finding. It's like a puzzle. It's like figuring out the puzzle, figuring out the darks and lights. So now, okay, I can say here, right here, is where my horizon, or where my path will begin. Okay, let's see here, what are we going to do next? Let's start to put in some of these mid-toned values back here that are going to help define the darks. I'm going to start putting in the sky later. I really want to get more of my mid-tones going. So to me, there's a dull in the distance fir tree back there. And I'm going to get that in. So I'm going to go with a mid-toned green back there. Looking at the shapes, I can see it starts right about here. And I'm just lightly scumbling those colors in. I will use this color as well somewhere else in the piece. I'm not sure where yet. I'm just focusing on this area for now. It's definitely behind this bigger evergreen. So I'll be doing some layering to make sure that that reads correctly. There is, however, a tree in front of the evergreen. So, you know, having these objects overlap each other it's really important. It helps show depth, which is what we're after as painters. We're like creating this three-dimensional space on a two-dimensional piece of paper. And in order to do that, we need to have overlapping objects to show that there is space going backwards. Put a little bit of that into this little guy, this little tree here. And a little bit, I see a little bit of that color in the background there. And just for unity, you know, I see a little bit of it. It's pretty dark, it's going to get lighter, but in this grassy area underneath my major tree. Okay, I'm going to come in now with quite a bit of a lighter color here. So let's really lighten that up. I'm not ready to go really bright yet, but I do want to start really lightening it up. And again, you know, if you don't have neutrals in your set, say, if you want to do this type of a painting, and you love green like I do, I mean, I live in Washington State, so there's green everywhere. I'm really fortunate to be in a rural area. You know, I live out in the country, and this is my landscape that I see. This is just about a 15-minute drive from me. So I need a lot of different tones of green. Since we work in pastel, you know, it's not, we don't blend, you know, we don't take a sap green and a titanium white like you would with wet painting to create, you know, and then add umber or whatever we might do to create all of these different greens in our painting. We have to do it by layering different pastel sticks, which I love. I just find it so fun and so direct to paint this way with pastel. To me, it's such a joy, and while I enjoy painting, you know, the other way with acrylic and watercolor, this is really my passion. So I've collected quite a few, you know, colors, and just do what you can over time. Get what you can and slowly build up your collection. And again, you know, it's more about the value and the temperature than the color, although I really do prefer not super saturated colors. Greens, bright greens look artificial. So let's go back in now with quite a bit of a lighter color, and that's really going to start to help to make this area pop. So we're going to go pretty yellow. Let's start with something like this. And as you can see, it's not a super bright color. I will even go brighter, but for now I'm okay with this. And I do tend, as you can see, to work certain areas and you know, focus on them and then go back. So I still have quite a bit to do over here. It's not by any means done. I'm going to bring a little bit of that down here. I can see there's a little bit of that color down in that area. I might smudge out a little bit. And that is starting to give me a sense of where I'm going. I am going to come back up in here. There's still too much of this background showing through for my liking. So I'm going to find another, this might be too light. Actually, I like that. It's pretty warm. It's warmer than it looks in the photo reference, but I actually want that. I don't want to copy this photo reference. I want to make my own painting. And like I said at the beginning of this video, I am purposefully making this a very warm scene. I'm using, you know, greens with more yellow in them than as opposed to more blue, because it's important to have a dominant color scheme in your painting. I'm going to bring a little bit of that down here. And I think, you know, I think I'm probably at this point going to do a thin layer of color on my path just to start to get an understanding of what that's going to look like. And I think I'm going to start with a very toned down violet. Let's see what that looks like. Might be a little bit saturated for my liking, but I've already started laying it down, so I'm going to go with it. It could be the shadow area, and I'll just end up going over it later. The real reason I'm doing this now is because I don't want to lose my path, you know, with all of these greens. And it's important to know that paintings go through an ugly stage. This is like, they're the teenager right now. And you just have to get through that. It's a process, and rushing it doesn't, for me, it does not help. It's about enjoying the process. It's about enjoying the journey, and not rushing it. Rushing it is not going to make it look good. Okay, so let's see here. I think it's important that before we go much farther, that we really get this background tree a little bit more finished. So I'm going to find a color to really make those branches pop and make it obvious that it's back there. And again, I'm going to go with a little bit of a bluer green. Let's see how that looks. I like that. So what I'm going to do is really just, I kind of loosen up my hand. Sometimes you'll see me do this. It's like I'm practicing. It's almost like I'm practicing the stroke. And I feel like I'm starting to lose my dark. So I'm going to come back in. That's too light. I'm going to come back in with a little bit of dark in here because it's important. That is like a pillar of dark that really helps hold the piece together, and I don't want to lose it. So I need to get that back before I go too much farther. So again, you can see that to me it's all about layering, and it's a process, you know. I mean, a piece like this might take me, I don't know, I mean, it's really hard to put a time limit on it, but a day could take me a day, 4 to 6 hours. Sometimes they come together much quicker, but with a piece like this, with all this foliage, it really can take some time just simply because of the layering process. Okay, so I feel like I've really gotten some of my darks back in, and I'm happier with that now. And you know, at this point, now that I have those darks back in, I might actually leave that alone for the moment. I don't want to overwork any one area too much, you know, because I'll have a tendency to lose sight of what's going on with the whole piece. So I think what I'm going to do is come down and get a little bit more done in here, and then actually start bringing some of the sky color in so that I can really start to see how things are working together. So I'm actually going to put in some more of these branches. And I'm going to use a very, very dark green to do that. Let's see what happens. You know, I need to go darker and more brown. So, and it's not a bad thing to have different colored branches going on. I'm using a really light touch, and I'm not overthinking where these branches are going. I can always cover them back up again, you know, with foliage, and I will cover them up again. That will happen. While I've got this in my hand, I'm going to add a little bit to my tree. Up in here, these branches will have a lot of sunlight hitting them, but for now, I'm going to just work on the dark. And really, I kind of just let this twirl. I never did put this one in. Let's get him in. He's kind of comes up and over like that. And if I have to adjust it later, that's okay. Also, I don't want to lose this little guy, so let's get him in. And I'll probably make these a little bit darker and not so saturated. This brown is pretty saturated, but since I love to layer, I'm okay with starting with this as a starting point. So that's good. Okay, so one thing I really want to do before I go any farther is I really want to get the light on these tree trunks up here. So if I look at this, it's very light, it's almost a sunshine color. It's kind of a yellowish brown. So I'm going to go find that. Okay, so I don't mind if I go out of the lines a little bit. That's part of the way that I paint. I can always adjust things later. So let's look at, I can see that this tree down here, I need to give it a little bit more of a dark base before I come back in with some light on the trunk. And I want to just go ahead and get, that might be a little bit green, but I'm okay with that for now. I'm going to come in with a little bit of light on this edge. As you can see, I kind of jump around a bit. There's no hard and fast rules. If I see something that I want to adjust, I do it, because I might otherwise forget later. I am going to start putting in a little bit of sky color. I want to establish what it is so that I'm just able to see the relationship of what it's all going to look like. And it'll really start to, you'll see the painting start to come together. And I need to step back and see if that color works. And I'm liking it. That's working pretty well. And the way that I go about this is I don't overthink it. You know, there's, what I do is I look at the shapes and I let my hand do a lot of the work. I dash and try not to make too many marks that are very similar. So if I'm, you know, I'm not going to go in a row. I'm going to let my hand make these marks, lift and release, lift and release. One thing I want to do is start to get some of this shape in. So, and what I'm going to also do is take a little bit of a lighter colored pastel, because the closer we get down farther, you know, from the zenith of the sky, it gets lighter. And it will also give us more of a focal point down in this area. And that's a natural way to lead the eye up into our focal area, which is, I'm hoping is right in here. So let's start to get that in. And I may go over this. I'm not using a super light touch. In fact, I need to remember that there's a light colored tree back there. I want to put that in right now. I want to see how that looks with my sky color. So I need to find that. And it's, to me, it really appears to be a pretty creamy colored yellow. And I'm gonna, that's pretty bright, but I'm gonna give it a try. Let's see what happens. And it's gonna come up like this. It's behind this tree. So I can actually kind of work it around this area. I'm okay that it's fairly bright like that, because I might actually start to use some of that up in here. Not too much, but this is where a lot of this negative painting comes in. I'm carving around. This could even be a little bit of ground in the background back there, or just light hitting. It doesn't really matter to me, because it's an impression of what's going on back there. So I'm being careful, because I'm being careful, but I'm also not. I know that sounds confusing, but I can see where I want the marks to go on the surface. But once I come in with my hand, I'm not really careful about exactly how I put the mark down. It's more about knowing where on the page I'm going, but once I'm there, letting my hand be loose. I do want to get a little bit more neutral in that area. So I'm going to do that real quick. This might be, it's a little bit too green. A lot of it is just finding the tones that work. I like that. And layering them. I'm actually going to bring some of that up into here. Let's see how that works. I like that. We're going to start carving out this color in this tree behind our evergreen. And it may be a little bit premature to be putting this light color in, but since I'm using such a light touch, not overly concerned about it. Come up in here, excuse me. Always looking at the shape. And before I really start to get in here, I want to get this tree in. So let's do that. It is quite a russet color. I'm going to start with this and see what happens. That's almost the color of the paper. And that's okay. I'm kind of like that. It doesn't have to be the exact color that I see in the reference photo, although I may come in with a little bit of a darker red. I just want to step back and take a look at that for a second. Okay, so I've got that mid-tone in. I'm going to jump around just a little bit, and that's just part of my process. I do want to go back to getting a little bit of the sky in over here. It'll really help me understand what I need to do. At this point, I've got quite a bit of foliage going on. I'll probably put more color in, but first I just need to start getting my shape established. So I'm going to go back in with some of my blue, and in these areas over here I'm going to start with a little bit of a darker blue. If you look carefully at the reference photo, you can see that some of these branches near the top of the canopy are blue looking, and that's because they're so close to the sky that it really does kind of make some of those branches and some of those leaves look blue. And I really like that effect. So, and especially when you're inside the trees like this, the sky is going to look darker because they're being filtered. The sky is filtered through these trees. So it's not going to be as bright. So I want to get some of that going. Let's work on it. And one of the things that helps is I'm painting around some of these branches. So the branches are often where the spaces are in between foliage. And that's kind of a good way to look at it. Now I am going to be going back in with a lighter blue. This blue is a little bit dark, but I don't mind because I like having that variation. So looking at the shape, there is a big area right in there. That's going to help determine a little bit. I'm going to go with a little bit of a lighter blue. That is going to help determine the shape of these leaves, the foliage. So I'm really kind of negative painting on that. So let's come back in here, and I'll probably even come back in definitely with some more leaves over some of this foliage or some of this sky, and that's part of that layering process I've been discussing with you. I'll probably even go lighter looking at this. And I need to step back and look, see what's going on here. There is quite a bit of sky peeking through up in here. And I really want to just start letting that go a little bit. If I try to get too careful, it's not going to look right. do that. I'm going to just start letting it go. And you can just watch for a minute because there's really not a lot to talk about except that I'm letting my hand do the work and I'm not overthinking it. Coming in lighter in the areas that I want to pop. I'm going to step back. See that up in here I want to give it a little bit of color variation. And what I may do, in fact I may do it sooner than later, is bring in a little bit of turquoise into my sky because it's such a warm scene that that green and blue will look good. But I don't have a turquoise out right now. Let's see here. So I'm going to have to come back to that if I even put it in. We'll see. Okay, so I'm now going to come in with a little bit more foliage. And let's see here. I want to vary up the color just a little bit so that it doesn't get too boring. That's nice. I'm going to come in with some of that. And just push it around a little bit. Make it vary. Make it try to look like nature, very natural. That's a little bit dark to be bringing over here. These get quite green in here. And this is a little bit too neutral because it actually appears more like the sun is shining on it, this color. So I'm going to come back in a little bit of a truer green. That might be too light. Yep. I kind of like this. That's nice. Let's go with that and see what happens. That's nice. Stepping back. It's a little bit of a light value. I like it, but let's see here. Let's try this. As you can see, I do have a lot of greens in my palette. Come over some of those areas and bring a little bit of it up into here. I do want to start coming over that trunk a little bit. Some of this color comes right over it and overlaps quite a bit. In fact, I'm going to bring some of that, just bring it right down to this area. And this could be a good color now to bring back into this guy up here and just scumble it around, give him that very evergreen-like branches which kind of go in this direction. And I'm pretty happy with that, actually. I'm going to leave it right there for now. I did lose a little bit of the dark at the bottom, which I'm going to put back in right in here. Those darks are important. And a little bit, there's some lights down here that I should probably start focusing on, but I'm still just not quite happy with this area. I feel like I've gone a little bit too light, so I need to work on that. That's better. I'm going to come in with some of this. And this is part of the process. It's the layering. And so that's how I've learned to achieve what I want to achieve with these forest scenes. Lots of layering. And, you know, if I put on too much, I can brush it off, but I usually don't have that issue because I do have a fairly light touch. There are some areas like up in here where I can see because I put dark over that light sky, it's gotten a little bit muddy, but I'm not too worried about it. I can brush it out if I want to. What I am going to do now, though, is come back in with some of this, the light on the trunk. And I really want to find the right color. And I'm really going to go, I'm gonna go pretty bold. I can brush it out if I don't like it. So I think I might try something like this. And I'm just gonna come in. I like that, that's nice. I'm gonna come in and with an edge, just define, let's see here, that's gonna take a little bit of work, but I'm gonna come in and define that trunk. So I don't like that mark I made, and that's fine. What I will do is I'll come back in with a darker color, and this is a softer pastel. This is a blue earth. I haven't used this yet in this piece, but it will very easily go over these Terry Ludwigs. And I'm going to just cover that up and even bring it up a little bit like that. It's not quite dark enough. I need to go a value darker. So I'm going to come in with a little bit of a darker, see if that's not really that much darker, but it's okay. The fact is that often times these darks are darker in a photo than they appear in nature, and we, you know, need to compensate for that in our painting. So it's not going to be quite as dark in my painting as it looks in the photo. And plus, once I start getting more of these lighter colors, I still haven't gone as light as I'm going to, then the darks will appear darker. Just getting some of those branches back in. I like this blue earth that I've picked up, so I'm kind of going with it a little bit. Started to lose that trunk. I'm going to put it back in. And since I've got this in my hand, I'm going to use it on a few of these other trunks in the background and down here. I remember I told you I didn't really like that blue or that brown Girault that I had originally put over here. So I'm correcting that a little bit. And while it's in my hand, I'll also just kind of add some ideas that there's some other branches and maybe trunks in these background areas. Let's step back and take a look. And now I'm going to try to come back in and get some of that color. In fact, the more I look at that, it almost looks more orange, and I was going a little bit yellow. So I'm going to go a little bit more orange on this trunk, and let's see what happens. I'm being careful here because this is a focal point, and it's going to have a bit of a hard edge, and I want it to look accurate. So that's not bad. I am going to end up covering up a little bit of this with foliage. Being careful, but still trying to make it look loose, which is not always easy. Okay, that's not bad. It'll require a little bit of refinement, but I'm okay with it for now. Even just small changes, like maybe a little bit of sky in there is going to change the shape of the trunk to a place where I'm happier with it. But what I am going to do is make it a little bit bigger down here, just to give it a little bit more of a shape that makes sense to me.